make a reaction video to this, but like there's not really a whole lot I want to react to because like, there's like a handful of things that I wanted to focus on, and there were, quite a few things I didn't want to touch on or discuss, but like Arlo's top 20 worst selling Nintendo Switch games video. It's unbelievable because it really does feel like one of the big Pretendo narratives right now is like acting as if like, oh no, Nintendo's more mature offerings don't do very well, because like watching this list, it's like him complaining about Xenoblade, complaining about Fire Emblem, and complaining about what was the other one? Bayonetta. It's like three major like tentpole like mature games from mature gamers, Nintendo franchises. Just attacked by Arlo in this video. He's sitting there trying to tell us like, yeah, I don't know how Monolith Soft is making money on these games, bro. Like they're really, really good at managing their resources. Like if you don't understand how Monolith Soft puts together their worlds and settings, like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 reuses a ton of assets from like 1 and 2. Anyone who's played this knows this. It's not like some rocket science thing. Like these games don't have like some big inflated budget like Final Fantasy 7 R or anything. They're doing perfectly well being million sellers. Same with Bayonetta 3, same with Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem. These games aren't like the huge big Nintendo sellers. That doesn't make them failures. Nintendo's even like gone on record saying that like Fire Emblem Three Houses is the best like selling Fire Emblem game like ever, like Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Xenoblade Chronicles has grown like 500% on Switch, like every Xenoblade game is available on Switch now, So this idea that like these games are like, oh, they're not performing, they're underperforming, they're not making their money back. It's just completely out of touch with reality, especially when you take into account the fact that like Monolith Soft is heavily invested in is heavily involved in like the Legend of Zelda series now. They worked on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So this idea that like, oh, like Nintendo isn't succeeding with Monolith Soft, it's just a complete out of touch take from someone who knows nothing about the franchise, nothing about the company, nothing about its involvement with Nintendo, nothing about like everything Monolith Soft does for them. It's just a completely insane hot take from someone who doesn't know what he's talking about, right? Like again, that's my big thing about this. I now that I've actually played Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and can like, tell people that like, yeah, it's by far the best game in the series, I am very, very much against like all the weird propaganda we've seen about the game, those games over the past decade. Like you've seen so many people like spurg out about this series, saying it's overexposed, and then on the opposite side, you have people like Arlo trying to say like, ah, these games are underperforming. I don't know if they can keep. Arlo, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. You're out of touch. You're a boomer. Okay. That's my thing about this. Like a lot of the games he talked about on this list did not underperform in any way, shape, or form. WarioWare did well, Famicom Detective Club did well. I talked about that. But like my thing about this, my thing about like his extreme like this video, the thing that really annoyed me personally was just how much vitriol he got for like he got towards a lot of like fairly recent releases. Mario and Luigi Brothership, Princess Peach Showtime, and I believe there was one other one. I think it was like WarioWare or something. Like, but anyway, like he tried and he seriously came out and said that Mario and Luigi Brothership failed because it only sold 6 million units in like 2 million units in like 6 months, right? This Muppet is going to come out and try and tell us that Mario and Luigi underperformed because it didn't do as well as like other Mario RPGs when by all accounts the game was like a huge success. It did very, very well for Mario and Luigi standards, right? Like clearly, again, this has been like a massive giga cope from like paper fags over like the past 6 months, but like Brothership did really really well. It's been very very well received, and like this narrative that like oh it's polarizing to some people, like it got mixed reviews from critics. Yeah, from Paper Mario fans who I've I've talked about this a lot. How they cannot be trusted when it comes to coverage of Mario and Luigi. Which is something I've covered extensively on this channel. Paper fags are the absolute last group of people you want to talk about Mario and Luigi. Like, just do not take anything these people have to say seriously at all. So much of like the discourse around Brothership was just people like beat 'em ups, like sitting there and just like chuckle fucking to themselves, like the Thousand Year Door was better than this. No, it's not. I grew up with the Thousand Year Door. Brothership is better. Not only is it better, it's like the best Mario RPG ever made, and probably one of my favorite RPGs ever. I loved Brothership, and to see so much slander like thrown against it, even like after all this time, is just embarrassing, and it's not going to stand the test of time, obviously. Brothership is like a very well received game that is going to get sequels. That we are going to see continue to get made. People. Woody, like beat 'em ups isn't going to have any credibility going into the sequel. Arlo never reviewed Brothership, I believe. So like, are they going to be able to downplay the sequel as extensively as Brothership? Like, I would say no. I said this when like beat 'em ups and Logan Plant did their little song and dance. Like, no, I'm a big fan of Mario RPG. I gave positive reviews to Super Mario RPG and the Thousand Year Door. Yeah, 20-year-old games that are beloved classic. 25-year-old in uh in Super Mario RPG's case, oh, these are old time like if they had tried to give negative reviews to those games, they would have gotten like lambasted. Like with Brothership, they had this like initial wave of like credibility where people like hadn't played the game yet and didn't know what to make of it. But like now that it's been out for quite a long time and people have actually played it, yeah, nobody agrees with this take that Brothership is a failure. Like nobody. It's just so laughably stupid. And this idea that it failed or underperformed, that it had bad word of mouth, not true at all. And I've been a very very vocal opponent of that narrative. Brothership was awesome, and I will continue like talking about this well into the future. But like the other thing that gets me about this, the other thing that like really got my goat about it is how angry Arlo got when he started talking about Princess Peach Showtime. He really tried coming out and saying that like this is a game for little kids. It's too easy. This is Peach's big moment, and they blew it. And it's just so laughably out of touch with what Nintendo is trying to do with the game and like who it's going to appeal to, and just like um I think people are going to be really surprised at how Showtime is like going to be like kind of a cult classic for a lot of people in the next 10, 20 years. Like it's not something uh the game is very, very, very good. So the entire cope that like people like Arlo have is like, well, it's too easy. Like, bro, I saw you stream the game. Okay, like I saw you struggle with like the baking zombie bits. You suck at video games. Okay, the game was tailor made for you because you're a filthy casual. But like, I just find it so obnoxious. How Arlo and people like him like really have continued this narrative that like Princess Peach Showtime was somehow disappointing or a failure. Because if you actually like play the game and like try to 100% it, collect everything, it's quite a bit. It's quite challenging actually to do everything in it. And this idea that like oh you just play everything once, that's coming from someone who never actually tried completing it, never actually tried putting in the time, like doing those boss fights. Like the game is reasonably challenging, and like the fact that so many people are like adamant that it's not is just like they just haven't spent any time with it at all. They don't appreciate like what the game was trying to do. They can't appreciate the spectacle of it, like its unique design, its features. Like it's the best game Good Feel has put out, I think, since the Wario Land Shake It. It's I think it's a great game. I was very very adamant about how much I love like Showtime and everything it did for the character and stuff like that. But someone like Arlo can't appreciate that. Like he has to like spin it in this way that like oh it's a failure because it only sold 1 million units. Like yeah sure whatever bro. It's just I not that take is also not going to stand the test of time. And finally, we do have to discuss like the WarioWare thing because I do think this is a big thing among the community right now. Is that like you're seeing a lot of people like come out and speak out against WarioWare as a concept. You know, they don't like the mini games. They don't like the nature of the games. Like they somehow think that WarioWare is keeping Wario Land from being made. Like this is the insane hot take that like people put out there, even though they're made by completely different developers and like they have nothing to do with each other other than both having Wario. Like the big hot take, the conspiracy is that like oh like Wario like we want Wario Land, not Wario where it's very similar to like what we saw with what's a good example? Hmm. Well, anyway, it's just like it's a very typical like just delusional pretendo cope, you know, like just finding something superficially similar about like two unrelated gaming IPs and then complaining about one not getting new entries while the other like continues to get made. Yeah, it's very similar to Mario and Luigi versus Paper Mario actually, in that regard. But like again, I don't know how mainstream this take is going to be, honestly. Like I I just I see it pop up every now and again, but like it's so frustrating to see, especially as like someone who has played a lot of WarioWare in the past couple of years. You know, like I love Get It Together, I love Move It. Like the games are great. So like to see people like Arlo like try and come out and say they're underperforming or failing or that no one likes them, that's pretty observably not true. And the fact that he constantly tries to weaponize these games to like kind of rally behind this weird idea that like Wario is being disrespected as a character is just completely ridiculous, honestly. It's something that like I do think people should be speaking out against more. It's just so unbelievably pathetic seeing these people try and like pretend to be like hardcore Wario Land fans when you just know they're not. You know, if they were hardcore fans, like wouldn't Wario Land Shake It was the last Wario Land game, right? Before like they did the spin-off things and stopped producing them. Like Wario Land Shake It was awesome, loved it on the Wii, great game. That was made by Goodfield, who went on to make like Princess Peach Showtime, a game that Arlo also hates. So instead of like acknowledging that like, the developers made Princess Peach Showtime and it's a good game, like he's instead going to turn around and start complaining about a new Wario Land game not existing while like WarioWare has come out of a hiatus. And WarioWare has been on a hiatus. That's definitely something people don't like to acknowledge. Gold was a compilation title. And Move It, Get It Together in 2021 was the first like original proper WarioWare game since like DIY in 2010. Game and Wario is technically a WarioWare game, but it's not really a traditional one. It's more like more of a mini game thing. But like yeah, like so yeah, it's been a long time since we gotten like WarioWare. Like and two entries in like 3 years is somehow like too much in the eyes of these people. It just doesn't make any sense at all. It really feels as if they're just looking for something to complain about. And that's my opinion, like watching this video and watching his hot takes and like seeing through all of his nonsensical formulas and his ideas on like what makes a game successful or not. Like the reality of the situation is that like a lot of the games he was talking about here served a purpose. Like I saw him talk about Everybody Want to Switch in this video. A game I did not buy, a game that like everyone says bombed and wasn't very good. It dawned on me that like that game allows you to use cell phones as controllers, right? I don't know exactly how that works, but like it allows you to use cell phones as controllers, right? um, that was clearly a big beta test for like what they're gonna do with Switch 2, like incorporating more smartphone elements into their consoles, and like like we're seeing that a little bit now, where you're gonna have like a smart map on your phone and stuff like that. They're clearly implementing more smartphone apps into like their technology, which is going to be a really big deal in keeping them like coexisting with like the smartphone ecosystem. So like there won't be any like mobile will not replace Nintendo. It'll coexist. Um, everybody wants to Switch was clearly like meant to beta test that concept. Games like WarioWare are really big about like beta testing like these features that haven't been fully utilized. They're big on like HD rumble and like the IR sensor and stuff like that. Like these games serve a purpose. Like it's not necessarily to make a huge profit necessarily. A lot of it is like just gauging how the audience like reacts to certain things. What they like, what they respond to, like how well this technology works in practice, right? Like that's a big part of like some of these releases. And like people like Arlo don't seem to really understand that. People like Arlo don't understand that there is an audience for something like everybody want to Switch. People like Arlo can't appreciate something like Princess Peach Showtime. Like people like Arlo complain incessantly about WarioWare while turning around and complaining about Princess Peach Showtime. Completely ignoring the fact that we haven't gotten a Princess Peach game since 2006. Like the double standards and the hypocrisy and just like the narrative, it just kind of blends together where like Arlo is just desperately trying to downplay a bunch of like lower budget, lesser known Nintendo games, and honestly, completely failing at it. There's a handful of games on here that like I don't think did well for whatever reason, but like by and large, I think all of them can be considered successes for what they were. All of them are just like really fun, interesting games with their own fan bases, with people who really enjoyed them and genuinely want to see more. And someone like Arlo just can't really process the fact that like there could be more to like a game release than simply sales numbers. That's Arlo cannot wrap his like little Muppet mind around the concept that like maybe there are more important things than selling a bunch of units.